Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The Finance Bill 2017 as passed in the Lok Sabha gives income tax authorities unprecedented powers with regard to raids and search and seizure of property. Of the many amendments made to multiple acts through this money bill, which was passed last week in the Lok Sabha, the amendment to Section 132 of the Income Tax Act empowers the taxman to not disclose to any person or even an appellate tribunal as to why a raid is conducted. The phrase reason to believe is now all an income tax official needs to raid a person's property. Moreover, this section can be applied retrospectively from 1962 onwards. That is, assessment can be done for persons raided from April 1st, 1962. And property can be confiscated from persons from April 1st, 1975 onwards. Income tax officials can also attach properties of any person that they choose to raid. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze if such powers are necessary for taxmen. Joining me on the program today are Rajesh Mahapatra, Executive Editor of the Hindustan Times, CM Vasudev, former Finance Secretary, Sitaraman, Principal Partner, Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan, he is also an advocate, and Rajesh Sharma, Central Council Member, ICAI. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Vasudev, I'd like to start with you first, of course, to talk about the amendments brought about in the Finance Bill as far as the taxmen are concerned. Do you believe at this point in time that the taxmen need more teeth to bite with?
Well, on the face of it, all these powers which are now sought to be conferred on the taxmen seem to be quite draconian. But I think one has to see it in the larger context, perhaps why the government had considered it necessary to do it at this stage. When this demonetization was being done, a lot of people with unaccounted money tried to beat the system by depositing money into their bank accounts or Benami accounts or some other accounts or opening new companies, various methods they have tried to follow to try to beat the system. Then it is now up to the taxman to try to see and try to identify such people who have tried to escape the tax net through these such dubious means. And therefore some additional powers are certainly needed for the taxmen in that sense, because they've issued more than 80,000 notices to people to try where there is a prima facie some suspicion. So to deal with this case, they obviously need powers to take quick action. There may be cases of whistleblowers who are informing them which they do need to inform. So one can understand the reasons why the government would have done it. One has to see whether sufficient safeguards have been provided to ensure that the honest sort of taxpayer is not harassed in the process. Because certainly the past sort of reputation of the department is not such that it has covered itself in glory. So I think some comfort for the honest taxpayer is necessary. I'm not sure whether the provisions in the law that have been proposed do provide for some safeguards of that type. I suppose in the rules that they will be framed under the law, some safeguard will be provided. That is very necessary. And second, I think is important that these powers should not be there forever. Once this process of dealing with the demonetization type of cases are completed, then perhaps one should go back to the original power, because this system of doing scrutiny of people on a random basis, on a computer generated basis, I think why was it done? It was earlier, it was all arbitrary and ad hoc and lot of power on the taxman's hands. Then the government had to come out with this provision that there will be no arbitrary scrutiny of cases. So there must be some sunset clause to these draconian powers. So these are the 2 points I want to make. One is that there must be sunset clause, and second is there must be some safeguards for honest taxpayers so that they are not needlessly harassed.
Indeed, those are very valid points that you're making. Of course, there should be safeguards as far as the honest taxpayer is concerned, and there should be a sunset clause as far as some of these draconian, you would call it, measures itself are concerned, but they are needed at this point in time. Sitaraman, would you say that the prevailing circumstances or what the government has found out over the last 3 or 4 months has prompted them to go ahead with this move? Is tax evasion in this country a major problem?
Yes, tax evasion has been a major problem right from the beginning. It has not happened in the past 3 or 4 months. But merely because there is tax evasion, you cannot say that the income tax department should be given such wider powers. What has happened here? The amendment itself reads that the reasons to believe recorded by the income tax authority shall not be disclosed to any person, any authority, or in an appellate tribunal. So which means you will record a reason, but that will not be disclosed to anyone. So it defeats the very purpose of recording a reason. It is not to say that recording a reason would be, or disclosing the recorded reason would jeopardize the income tax authority search and seizure operations, their powers for or the actions or the sources of the information that they have got and things like that. Yes, you have to protect some information which you have collected, some sources of information, but assume a case where there is a genuine, honest taxpayer is harassed by an overzealous income tax officer who thinks genuinely that there is some problem with a particular assessee, and he goes on conducting the search and seizures, and at the end nothing comes out of it. Even that honest taxpayer, when he has to go to the tribunal or to any other authority to establish that the raid itself was not warranted, now he cannot get any reasons why this raid was conducted. So therefore, it is going 1 mile ahead of what is required, because the entire section, if you read 132, it starts off with some senior officials of the department will authorize some other officials of the department who will conduct the search and seizure operations, provided there are reasons to believe that there may be some evasion. Now, the entire checks and balances which was built into the system is now being taken away by introducing this clause that the reasons that I record will never be disclosed. So, for all you know, there may not be any reasons written, or there may not be any valid, reasonable reasons written there. So, this is something which goes beyond what you can call a normal canons of administrative secrecy,
Sure.
that. And so therefore it is, in my opinion, a draconian power.
All right. Rajesh Sharma, whom is the taxman going to be accountable to? Because he's not going to be accountable to the appellate tribunal, he's not going to be accountable to anyone. So whom is he going to be accountable to at the end of the day?
First, I will try to correct my friend Sitaramanji for one thing, that in section 132, if any power of any search is given, definitely it is given by a higher authority. And prior to that, some reasons have been recorded and proper preliminary investigation is being done, then only it is given. Otherwise, it cannot be done. It cannot be given for everyone. So, without proper reason, it cannot be given. The first thing. Second thing, there was never a requirement that the reason to believe need to be given to the persons, the SSC. It was never there. I will quote a very particular thing why it was required now. Because in the year 2015, there was a case of decided in the Supreme Court, DGIT versus Spurwood Furniture, as well as in 2016 another case came, that was DCIT versus Ram Prasad. In both these cases, Supreme Court gave a decision that it need to be given. So now it was a dilemma that whether it need to be given or not, because you are not denied. So now government need to make the law very clear that it should not be given and it need not be given. So for this clarification, government has come out with this. And I can say that if it is given, then if you say, as Mr. Vasudev told, that if some information is given by some informer, definitely that informer will be getting some life threat also or some other type of threats. So definitely it cannot be given to the person. Its searches are only done to persons who are avoiding tax, the unscrupulous persons who are not paying the legitimate tax. So it is only done to them. So definitely I can say that this reason to believe was an important thing, and now the act is now made clear. So the government part, the law part is clear, and definitely if the High Court needs it, High Court can take it. I can say very definitely.
But my question being, whom does the taxman answer to now? I mean, where is the authority?
They were the one who were definitely answerable to the courts. They were the one who were answerable to their higher authorities also previously.
But the court is out of the picture now.
No, it is never out of the picture. This is a myth which has been created in the political circle in the discussion today. But I found it was never that court is out of picture. High Court definitely prevails, and whenever High Court needs, it can ask for reasons. Okay. But it cannot be misused, taken and misused. So that was the reason.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean that clears the confusion then as far as the courts itself are concerned. Now. But Mr. Vasudev, coming back to you now, does this complete authority, sweeping power given to the taxman, does it leave the scope open for corruption? Does it leave the scope open for some kind of, unscrupulous behavior by the taxman?
Certainly, I think that danger is very much there. That is why I made this point earlier, that there must be some safeguards that are provided in the rules, if not in the law, that this power is not misused. And there are some avenues available to honest taxpayers who feel they are being unjustly dealt with by the department. So I think government has to take into account that aspect. Because, as I said earlier, the past sort of reputation of the department has not been of the highest standard in that sense. So it is the same people who have been given this power. So government must, I think, factor that in. And there is a very distinct possibility or probability that such draconian powers may be misused, howsoever important they may be and required under the current circumstances. So there should be, I would certainly like to wait for the rules that will be laid down or the directions that will be issued by the CBDT once the law is passed in Parliament, that how these powers are going to be used. I think they should not be used in a totally unbridled manner. And as I said earlier, there must be a sunset clause for such powers. They cannot remain forever, that you can do search and seizure of anybody without assigning any reasons.
Fair enough. Rajesh Mahapatra, Executive Editor of the Hindustan Times, joins us on the debate right now. Rajesh, so far on the debate, we've been talking about safeguard and how to safeguard the honest taxpayer, and also talk about, Mr. Vasudev was talking about a sunset clause as far as some of the draconian aspects of the amendments itself are concerned. But an issue such as this requires wide-scale debate and a lot of thinking too, isn't it, before it comes into existence?
I'm sorry, I joined in late. Perhaps I have missed out the context of what you were discussing. But I guess it is about the amendments to the finance bill.
Yes, it is. And it is also, of course, as far as the taxpayer itself is concerned, the taxmen have been given more teeth to bite with at this point in time. And there's still a lot of ambiguity as to how the rules are going to be in place and what kind of powers the taxman is going to get and whom are they really going to be accountable to in the near future.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on these issues. So I would limit myself to saying only this much, that within what authorities and empowerment that our tax officials have in today's context, it is good enough to go a long distance in enforcing the tax measures. And our failing in all these years has been we have not been able to enforce the tax measures that we have in place. I am not very sure bringing in these amendments where the pretext is that you are giving a lot more space and a lot more empowerment to your tax officials, and that would be critical to realizing the goals that you have set out for yourself, that it would make a very big difference. I'm not sure. And as you very rightly said, we still haven't seen the details, and the devil might lie in the details.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And we still have to get some clarity on as far as that is concerned. But Rajesh Sharma, can you throw some light on that?
So basically, I agree to what Vasudevanji is saying, that it is definitely that the honest taxpayer should not be facing the problem or facing the fire and the brunt due to this law. But at the same time, if they are not going to face, you cannot leave the tax evaders also at the same time, because the tax evader need to be caught hold. In the last 2-3 years, you would have seen in last 2 years, the tax collection has increased. And India, if you check with the GDP, the tax ratio is quite less. In India, if you need development, if you need to grow, definitely your tax collection should be more. India is not that a tax compliant society. Everyone knows it well. It need to be made tax compliant. For that, you need to make rules also, so that the genuine taxpayer, rules and guidance should be there, so that the genuine taxpayer, when the fine print comes and the rules comes from the department, definitely they need to safeguard the genuine taxpayer also. It is definitely needed.
Indeed, fair enough. You know, now, is the government creating some kind of a fear psychosis, Sitaraman, so as to ensure that these tax evaders come out and actually pay the tax? Because if they do not pay the tax, then they have this thing on the back of their mind that they could be raided at any point in time without any reason being given.
Yes, this is one way of looking at this amendment. See, I would like to look at this amendment not from the point of view of one perspective, that is, there are tax evaders and I have to necessarily have the powers to go undertake search and seizure operations in an unhindered manner. Yes, no, I am not in favor of looking at it only from an administrative exigency perspective. I would like to look at it from a citizen's point of view. Yes, I as a citizen has an obligation to pay the taxes, and the government has a duty and a power to collect the taxes. When there is a mismatch, when there is some problem in this collection machinery, you have to have some power to enforce it, that I pay the tax that is due from me. But for collecting that, for ensuring that whatever rules that you introduce should follow or should pass the test of rule of law. The rule of law would include a number of factors, but it will also include certain checks and balances. By giving an iron curtain that whatever reasons I have for undertaking a search and seizure operation against any person, irrespective of whether there is a tax evader, whether the person is a tax evader or not, goes little far beyond. So this, you have to look at it, this is a provision which has been amended retrospectively from 1962
yes.
or from 1975, depending upon the relevant sections. From 62 to 2017, 55 years we have had this provision, and all of a sudden today you need to come out with a provision that says I will not give a reasoning. I think this says what is being done today. So there is no need for this kind of a power. Even the existing provisions would have given the same set of powers in almost all the situations. So therefore, in my view, this is an excessive power which is being sought under this section, and it would create a lot of problems for honest taxpayers.
Sure. Mr. Vasudev, do you agree with that? You know, the aspect of it, of course, should have been left out of it as far as the taxpayer is concerned, because you followed a rule for almost 55 years and suddenly you have a new rule. Why not that rule apply from today rather than going back to 1962?
Frankly, I think there must be some legal reasons why that has been done, some judicial pronouncements why this government may have thought it necessary to do it. As somebody a short while ago in this discussion also mentioned, that there is some Supreme Court order in 16 and in 15 where probably the feeling was that the judiciary felt that the reasons should have been given to the taxpayer himself or something like that. So maybe it is to counter some of those unintended consequences of the law as it was framed at that time. But reasons to be recorded does not mean that the reasons that have been recorded should not be open to judicial scrutiny. Certainly they will be open to judicial scrutiny. All that probably means is that you don't have to convey these reasons to the tax assessee. But if there is a judicial case and a judicial scrutiny, then obviously the reasons to record it will become justiciable, whether they were arbitrary or mala fide. So that is not such a big issue. But the other point I think which somebody else has made in this debate is very important, that we already have so much power in the tax authorities which are not being used, and therefore we have this current situation that hardly 30-35 lakh taxpayers are there in our country. So we are not able to use the existing powers, and we are enacting more and more stringent powers, giving more and more stringent powers. So that has been a phenomenon, I think, in many areas of governance in our country, that for lax enforcement of existing laws, the legislative response is to enact more and more stringent laws, that now if that does not work, this will work. So the result is that the real sort of culprits, they are able to get out of the system and they are able to find some ways, and it is only the honest person who gets trapped in these new laws. So I think at the point of repetition, I need to emphasize that government must provide some safeguards in the rules so that this power is not misused, and it is used only in genuine cases where there is sufficient suspicion that there has been an attempt to tax evasion.
Indeed, fair enough. Rajesh Mahapatra, but the point really being, will it really be used judiciously? Will it really be used only to target those who are evading the taxes, or will it be used on the lines of Makoka or AFSPA we've seen in the past?
I would reiterate what Mr. Vasudevan said, and I think this is what I mentioned earlier, that there are two objectives. One is when somebody talked about the tax GDP ratio being low. So what do you do when your tax GDP ratio is low? You need to take that up so that the government has enough money at its disposal to pursue the development objectives that it has. Now there is a need, and a dire need, to expand the tax base rapidly, and we haven't been very successful at that. And I think expanding tax base doesn't need the kind of provision that has been brought in. And there is absolutely no need for that. There is enough in the law, and it is a question of intent, it is a question of having the right plan, and it is a question of having the willingness to execute the plan. And successive governments have failed at that, and there is nothing that suggests that by bringing this amendment you would be able to overcome the reasons that have been behind the failure of the past governments to expand the tax base as adequately as it ought to have been expanded. So that's the first question. So then the second question, the second objective is that it is important not only to expand the tax base, but also to enforce the tax measures that we have in place. And so what this amendment seems to achieve is to actually say, in a way, suggest that, well, probably the existing powers are not good enough, and so they need to be empowered more to enforce the tax measures. I do not think that is really a correct reading of the situation. And when you do not address the real reasons as to why tax measures have not been enforced, and you find an answer which has never been the reason, then it sort of prompts others to suspect the motive behind this move. And if there are people who are then fearing that this could be used in different ways in terms of witch hunting, probably that suspicion, those suspicions have justification just by virtue of the way these amendments have been brought in. And then the last point that I would like to make, somebody talked about how the taxmen have been hindered in ensuring that people do not evade taxes. Now, these hindrances are not hindrances raised by the law or the lack of necessary regulations. These hindrances, on most occasions, are hindrances brought into place by politicians, by people who are in power.
Sure. Yes, indeed. Yeah, Rajesh Sharma, you wanted to make a point.
Basically, I will say two things. The first thing, as Mr. Vasudevan also agreed, because in past also the reason to was never given, but as the court, as it was not denied, court allowed it that it should be given, and court denied it without seeing the consequences. So it was to be misused. So definitely a clear-cut thing so that persons will not rotate around that whether it should be given or not. So the law need to be clear. So that was the reason for the first thing. The second most important thing which is done here to attach the property. Attachment of property was there with the assessing part, not with the investigating person. But the person who is investigating, and in that span from investigation to assessment, there is a very long span. And the persons who are I can say tax evaders, they are clever enough, they misuse this, they always try to divert their property, and for those reasons always in past it was seen that the tax persons, the tax officials faced problems in taking the things from them, taking the tax from them, because finally the asset was not left with him. So for those reasons it was quite necessary to have this, and lot of cases are pending, so definitely a retrospective effect need to be given for it is specifically for the tax evaders. So that was the basic reason that legitimate tax which is due to the country should come, and the tax evaders should not be left out. In last 2 years, I previously also told the tax have improved. One more thing, but that is not of much value, that the valuation can be now done, can be ordered by the investigating officer also. But that is much not talked of today. The attachment provision, which is the most important thing, but that is required. Otherwise, they try to transfer it to someone else and all those things. This type of clever tax evasion plans cannot be done. So for that, government need to take plans, and it is indeed required.
That's a valid point that you're making. I've got time for one final comment on the program. Sitaraman, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Very good. See, India is one of the largest democracy. And we take pride in being a community which is ruled by the rule of law. These kind of amendments aims to negate the rule of law. I would say that government should be even more cautious and try to avoid such amendments which goes to the very root of the principle of rule of law.
Indeed. All right. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Rajesh Mahapatra, CM Vasudev, Sitaraman and Rajesh Sharma. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching.